Hi gaming guys, and welcome to another special projects replica style build. And on this occasion we're replicating a kind of obscure car. It's a concept car, or a show car if you will, and it's based on the 5th generation Golf. Now this vehicle is called the Golf R-GTi. It's significantly more powerful than both the GTi and the R32 of that generation. It puts out 375 horsepower, and it does have some major visual changes. Now unfortunately on the game we don't have that much visually that we can do to this Golf, even though it is a premium. So all I've actually done to it, to make it look more like the R-GTi Golf, is of course fitted different wheels, which in this case are Oz rims, and I've gone for the size up 1 on those. So you don't want it to be ridiculously big, but a little bit larger than stock. We've gone for Colton Red on those rims, which comes from the older shape Mitsubishi Evo, which is a nice strong red. And for the body of the car, I've gone for Crystal Galaxit Black, which comes from the Mercedes SLR McLaren. So you don't have to go for those colours of course, but the real car does have black or in part carbon fibre bodywork and red wheels, which actually look fairly similar to those Oz rims. So as far as the visuals, there's no real need to go over to the visual tuning garage for that. So we'll go first of all to the mechanical garage, and then of course to a racetrack. Now with this particular build, this is more about the fun of driving the car and just having the replica for the sake of it, so stuff like PP relevance isn't quite as important. Now you can make it more PP relevant if you change the specs, but I've opted not to for this particular build. So as you can see, it's kind of an off number at 518, but it doesn't matter too much in the case of this car. Now I've gone for Sport Soft tyres. I've left the brakes standard. I'm not aware if the actual R-GTi uses really highly upgraded brakes. It may well do, but I've opted to leave those stock. Feel free of course to upgrade them if you want to though, it doesn't affect the PP of course. As far as suspension, we've lowered the ride height to 100, front and rear. Springs to 725 and 625. The dampers to 4, anti-roll we've left on 3, neutral camber, neutral toe. We'll come back to the gearbox in just a second as we usually do. For the diff, I've opted for the lowest initial torque, highest possible braking and acceleration. As far as power, as I mentioned earlier, the real car has 375 horsepower, so a seriously powerful hot hatch. I've opted for an oil change, stage 3 engine tune, sports computer, sports exhaust, manifold, cat, high RPM turbo and intake tuning, and then you don't need to reduce the power at all. As far as the weight, you want to reduce the window weight and then add 2 kilos of ballast, and I've opted to put that all the way to the back to bring us to the actual weight of the real car, which is 1,328 kilos. Now as far as the gearbox, I wasn't able to find if this vehicle actually has an uprated gearbox or if it's running the same gearbox as the normal GTi. It seems unlikely that it would be running the exact same gearbox, but at the same time it was primarily a concept slash show car, not a vehicle which is actually expected to break lap records, etc. So you've got a couple of options really. You could go for whatever gearbox setup you want. You could go for the one that I've opted for, which is just one which works pretty well with it but isn't necessarily as accurate to real life as possible, or you could go for the safe bet, which is to just leave it stock, because at least then that is the Golf GTi gearbox. Now if you do wish to copy what I've done and make the gearbox a little more suited to that kind of power, then you can go for an auto setting of 180 as you can see, then for individual gears of 3.3, 2.2, 1625, 1250, 1 and 850 with a final drive of 3.5. And so that's it overall for the mechanical build. Now let's of course take it out to a track and see how well this vehicle, which is cool on paper as a concept car, works in practice. Now the way that the car performs overall of course is dependent in part on the tyres you choose to use and whether or not you do opt to leave the brakes stock or upgrade them. As it is, the car deals with 375 horsepower and the associated weight, really well. The handling is very good, and as long as you don't put your foot down too early, say mid-corner for instance, it doesn't actually spin up the tyres too badly. If of course you get on the throttle too heavy or too early, then of course, yes, it will spin up those front wheels. Overall though, if you do decide to use this replica, obviously I hope you find it fun. Not necessarily competitive in racing, because that's not its purpose, but for now, as always, thanks for watching.